Y'all are in for such a treat. Joining us next in our discussion is Sue Alvarez. She is the Director of Environment and Sustainability at the North Central Texas Council of Governments. I'm going to invite Sue to join me here. We are going to have a discussion about water infrastructure.
Yay.
Take it away, Sue.
I will. I see a lot of good friends that I haven't seen in a bit, and so I'm really excited to see the people I know and see some people that I haven't met yet that I'm looking forward to meeting. So I'm a water girl. It started when I was about 8, and my dad took me down to the creek, and we found salamanders and got some frog eggs, raised some frogs, and I've been mucking around in creeks pretty much ever since. So I'm excited to talk today about all things water towards a more sustainable future here in North Texas. And so I was at an event in San Antonio last week, and John Nielsen Gammon, who's the state climatologist, spoke, and I love this quote, and that really sets how we should be thinking about water. We're in periods of drought interrupted by extreme flooding. And I did a little bit of time working on the National Climate Assessment. The map on the right is from that assessment, and it's an increase in periods of what they call extreme rainfall, which is more than 2 inches per day. So we had one of those this last weekend. I got 4 inches the weekend before, so it's happening more often, and that's why we've got a nice dark blue. But the dark blue and those 2-inch rainfalls that happen once in a blue moon is interrupting ongoing drought. And a majority of the state of Texas right now is in drought. We think we have plenty of water. I've heard people say we have all kinds of water, but maybe we're not as careful with it as we need to be. So some of the things that I'm working with now at the COG is we're looking at drought. We're looking at how do we flood-proof our areas? How do we look at localized flooding? One of my favorite graphs that I didn't bore you with here is after Hurricane Harvey, in the state after event report, there was a graph that showed that there's a 40% increase in flooding in non-floodplain areas. In other words, we're getting more flooding in areas that aren't supposed to flood, and it's happening more often. And so that's a challenge. And so we're looking overall in how the rain falls, how it affects us, and really, as engineers and planners, how do we use that data to build a better landscape and to make our communities more safe? So, love this. Yes? I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
At 40% increase over what year?
Last 40 years. It's figure 5 from the post-Harvey report put out by the governor's office. And it's one of my favorite graphs because basically it says it's flooding where it ain't supposed to. And so what that means is that we need to better address where water goes in our communities, and it makes a really good argument for additional green space because that's a good place for that water to go on a temporary basis. So I found a nice water cycle because we're going to be talking all things water today. And it's, David was like, well, it looks like you're just doing this from a COG perspective. Well, yes, I am, because I work for the COG now. But we're talking about all things water, and it is all one big happy cycle. And you really can't separate, oh, well, we don't have enough surface water, so I'll just drill a well and do groundwater. Well, guess where that groundwater eventually goes if you're not pumping it out? Surface water. So it's all one big happy system. And water runs Texas. It's also a finite supply. If you see something where they say they're developing new sources of water, no, it's new access to water. It's not necessarily a new source. So again, we have a Water Resources Council. They had a meeting today that I missed, but we really look at it as one water. We look at water supply. How good a quality is that water? wastewater, stormwater. We're spending a great deal of time right now on floodplain planning. And then we serve as the regional planning agency for the Texas Water Development Board, both with respect to water supply and also for flooding. And there we go. So Trinity Watershed Basin as a whole is huge. We're up in the upper part of the basin. It's over 17,000, almost 18,000 square miles. It is one of the few watersheds in Texas that is wholly contained within Texas. And you can't really tell from this map, but it's from almost the Oklahoma border all the way down to Liberty Bay. And it provides, and I think this data is wrong because we've got 8 million people in the Metroplex, but it is a significant source of drinking water within the state of Texas. So that's the basics. Come on. Oops. Yeah. Well, I play with the clicker here. There we go. So this is something that I want y'all to be aware of. It came out last week. It is a statewide water supply planning effort. They are looking for comments. If you feel moved to do so, it'd be really helpful if you did. So what they did is worked within all of the different regions of Texas to identify what the infrastructure needs are to serve both the future and existing folks in Texas. This number does not include data centers, and it does not include fixing old infrastructure. And so they're coming up with $174 billion with a B dollars, and that's $23 not including the inflation that has incurred so far in 26. And it identifies gaps in water service. The water surface reservoirs are critically important. And conservation, water conservation measures, how well we use water, is probably one of the more critical elements of this plan. There are some new reservoirs planned. They are highly contentious. Is that the answer, or do we make the best use of the water sources we have? So the other thing is, here at the COG, we do demographic projections. We're looking at, in the COG area, going from 8.5 to over 12.8 billion by 2030. The critical piece is we had 200,000 people move into the Metroplex last year, and the same amount for the last 5 years. So that's moving a city the size of McKinney into the Metroplex someplace every year. That's a lot of people. They're not bringing water with them. They're not bringing infrastructure with them. 80% of this growth is within regions C, G, H, and L. Well, C and G are the Trinity Basin. So a large piece of that growth is in our backyard. The other critical thing, and this was something I was asked about yesterday and wasn't expecting the question, but if we do not address the 174 or 180 or whatever it is for water supply over the next 50 years, 1 out of every 4 Texans by 2080 will only have about half the water they need for municipal purposes. And so this is a significant shortfall. This is a really great graph showing the growth in water resources. Actually, this is growth in people over time. And there we go. And there's our water challenge. And as Colin said earlier, we're okay till about 2050, but the next 30 years beyond that are looking a little troublesome. The other thing is, once you drink it, it has to go out someplace. And it's one of those things, people like to flush their toilet and it goes away. As we are developing, this is some work that is in the water quality management plan that my staff have been working on. As we develop the areas with all those nice colored dots are septic tanks or septic systems. They work great out in a rural area where you don't have too many of them. at a density of about 1 per square mile, they cease to work as well. And as you can see, we have some opportunities for additional wastewater management. One of the other things is that I call this my earthworm map. So the red areas are places where we have something called TMDLs, which is short for total maximum daily loads. And what that is a pollutant limit for bacteria. There are some studies that say any place where it's warm and you have ongoing water in a stream, you're going to see bacteria. That is some context. The challenge, though, is this is bacteria in numbers that are potentially impactful for humans for recreation. So in other words, you can't swim in those waters without getting sick. There was comment earlier about water quality in the river. I will tell you from my own work on that is typically if the water is below bank full, it meets water quality standards. When it doesn't is right after a storm. And it's kind of like when you wash dishes and you run water over the plate before it's gone into the dishwasher and all the bits of stuff come off. Same thing happens in a natural system. And so the immediate first flush is going to maybe not be the best water quality. These are our new projects for, remember I said we needed wastewater projects. These are new projects in the region. The other thing I wanted to clarify a little bit is Cullen said that we have, I think he said 13 counties in the metropolitan region. We actually have 16 in the COG region. We are the Metropolitan Planning Organization for 12, and so that creates a little confusion. But basic to say we're doing planning for the counties in and around the DFW area. One of the other critical things that happens as we develop is as we develop, we tend to cover things up with like roofs and sidewalks and driveways and, I don't know, data centers, other things that shed water. So the picture on the left is current conditions as far as percent impervious. And generally the water can go in and we're getting the water in the western and northern parts of the Trinity watershed generally soak in because it's generally agricultural. However, we anticipate by 2070 that those areas are developing, and they are developing right now. And so as such, if we go to that full 35% impervious, the systems that are currently in Dallas and Fort Worth will be under capacity. And so there will be increased flooding in the Metroplex from ongoing development upstream of the Metroplex. And so we are undertaking a pretty significant project, and Erin Blackman is here, and she's currently serving as project manager for this effort. But we're currently looking at, and the full name of this project is the Upper Trinity River Basin Integrated Transportation Stormwater Infrastructure Initiative, which is a mouthful, so we just say TSI, and it gets some of the letters in there someplace. So it's really more proactive planning, so that we can integrate stormwater infrastructure better into the built environment for roads and to include the green space necessary to provide that buffer from the planned, and we know it's happening, development upstream. So the idea is not to tunnel our way out of it after the fact, but to build as we design and to really look at more critically how much water is coming and how can we slow it down and how do we hang on to some of it so that overall the watershed behaves more closely to the way it would right now. So this is a fairly good sized project. And what we found is the red area is the project area for this. We have over 200 cities. The average size of those cities, including Fort Worth, is about 2,000 people. And so when you go and talk to these cities, and we're like, well, okay, what's your flood warning system? And somebody stands up and says, well, you know, I'm the city manager, I'm also the police chief, and postal clerk sometimes if we need it. And here's what we do. These are small towns They don't have 100 people in their drainage department. They don't have the means to hire consultants, but they're seeing all this growth. And they're asking good questions about, well, yes, we'd like to see the economic growth, but we don't want to impact our quality of life. And so we have implemented this project to help these cities. So we're developing a policy and ordinance library. We're doing libraries. Here's where you find funding to do what you need to do to get the infrastructure. We're developing standard operating procedures. And the reason is, as we're developing this project on the north and west, our friends in the southeast part of the Metroplex have started showing up at the meetings going, hey, when are you doing Lancaster? When are you doing Kaufman? Because they're seeing the same things as far as growth, and they have the very same needs as far as how do we address that growth. And so this is probably the first time we've ever done this. It is a great project. It's been a nightmare from a management standpoint just because there's so many different partners. We're working with the Corps, we're working with several water utilities, we're coordinating with TxDOT because a lot of their roads are impacted. And we have, I think, 3 or 4 consultants on board, including the Corps and UTA. They're all doing all kinds of modeling. So we're doing one-dimensional modeling, two-dimensional modeling. We're, for lack of a better term, jacking up the rainfall so that it more accurately reflects the future inundation frequency that we're seeing in real life. And the other thing that we're doing is moving storms around. One of the things that the Corps has looked at is that where a storm occurs in a watershed impacts how that watershed responds. You saw that with Hurricane Harvey. We saw that for any of you who have been here in April and May of 2015. We had a storm that just parked in the upper parts of the watershed, and we had significant flooding. And so they're looking at how moving the storms around and looking at, okay, what's the worst case? And then we're looking at, well, okay, we want nature-based solutions, but do we do it everywhere? And how much storage do we need? And where do we get the most bang for the buck for the storage? In other words, we're trying very hard to do the planning so that as we build, we're building smarter, not harder, and we're not having to go back and redo things that are already in the ground, which is way more expensive. So, shameless plug, because I have the opportunity. If you want more interest or more information, our website is on this slide, but we also have what I call the Traveling Roadshow, where we're going out into the community, talking to some of the impacted local governments and getting their input on the things we're coming up with, so that we can incorporate what the local governments want to do into the end plan. The other thing that we're doing, and it's exciting and actually kind of scary, we're doing strategic planning right now, both within the agency. Our strategic plan for the agency was good until 2025, which is last year. We have a new executive director, and he wants to take a look at, well, what is the agency as we're set up right now going to meet the needs of our community moving forward? Don't know. Additionally, we were approached by the folks that did the original Vision North Texas in, I think, 2008 about updating that plan, because several of the future things identified in that original plan have already come to pass, and it's not 2030 yet. So we started just because they thought it was easy with water. And so we had a meeting end of February, and we're working with the Greater Dallas Planning Council, ULI, UTA, North Texas Commission, and COG. And we invited every expert that would show up, and some didn't, which is disappointing, but that's okay. We had the affected water utilities, MUDs, special utility districts. We invited the groundwater conservation districts, because one thing that we're finding is in areas with tight water supplies, the developers are like, okay, cool, I'll just do an UD and I'll drill a well if you don't have surface water for me. Well, that affects things too. And so we had them all in the room. We invited Texas Water Foundation. We invited other funding folks. And we had some water rights attorneys sitting in the room just for fun, so that they told us, no, you can't hang on to that. There's already adjudicated water rights. So, but it was really good. So we put them at tables, we mixed them up so that all the university folks couldn't sit together and all the water people couldn't sit together. They had to talk to each other. We had a series of topics: climate, conservation, resilience, development in the built environment, finance, water quantity, both supply and demand, water quality. What are we doing to make it easier for that? And then, of course, since I am a local government agency, we had to talk about regulations and governance. One of the things that we found is we then, I have to admit, we used AI, because my staff, it was an afternoon session, and we had all kinds of sticky notes from each table and each discussion and each topic. We used AI to pull it together. And what we found is a couple of things. There was a recommendation to shift from site-by-site review and permitting to more of a regional effect. So you're looking at cumulative impacts of the growth, to align development incentives with long-term performance, and to make water the organizing framework. So yes, I'm still back to ruling the world one inlet at a time. So some of the other resource themes that came out, though, are things that I think we want to talk about moving forward. First and foremost, water will define the future of North Texas, probably Texas as a whole. What we have that is limiting growth right now, realistically, is infrastructure capacity. I know of some projects that weren't able to move forward because they simply didn't have the water and wastewater infrastructure. And then Cullum talked about this a little bit this morning, sprawl versus density. It is both a financial and an environmental challenge. Developers like incentives. They like to feel like they're in control. And then lastly, and this came from some of the county folks we had, from the Texas legislature, the way they have done rules governing development, there are county gaps. And so what is happening as a result of that is a lot of developers go out in the county, outside of the ETJs of the cities where there are rules, and the sky's the limit. It's literally the Wild West, and they do their thing. And the local governments that are there are struggling to do what they need to do to maintain quality of life for their particular communities. And with that, I'm happy to take questions. And I know David told me he has comments and suggestions as well, so go for it. Can we get Brandy a microphone?
Give me a mic right now. Be right there. There you go. Thank you, Brandy.
Yeah, to your, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. To your point on the county regulations, one of the things we've talked about, we've got significant ETJ in Fort Worth, and we do leverage water access as a way to pull the development within our codes and regulations. But one of the challenges we have, especially on the outskirts of our ETJ, is that they're looking at adjacent communities. And if the regulations in those adjacent communities are less than ours, they're going to build and incorporate with those communities. And so aligning all of our requirements for development across the region is going to be critical moving forward. And then just on water, this is my shameless open space plug. We can't back our way out of some of these things once they're done. When a site is graded for development, your infiltration is cut to about 2 to 3% of what it was originally. And there is no way to get that back. And so when we talk about our floodplains and the need to protect them, we need to protect them as they are today and not after that site's been graded. And so when we're protecting green space within development, it's not go in and grade the site and then plant some trees. That green space is no longer serving the ecosystem function that it was originally. And so we need to be thinking about preserving those habitats as they are before that development comes in. And then just one last thing to think about, in Texas, we have some of the fastest subsiding cities in the country. And that is mostly from groundwater that's being removed. And so I think those are some really important considerations as we move forward.
All three are correct, and I agree with all three. I do think that's one place where the COG can help, because one of our big things is, and that's one of the other things with the TSI library, is some ordinances that communities within those developing counties, local governments can consider as a place to start, because a lot of them also don't have staff engineers or planners. They don't have attorneys, even, a lot of them. And so what we're trying to do is provide the tools to help the communities do what they need to do. I like the idea, and it's something we could take on at the COG as appropriate, is let's take a look, because we have a whole codes committee. We take a look at what codes could help. And I think the key is consistency. I want to give Fort Worth a shout out too, because they're currently working on 2 ordinances that are, well, one's a program and then there's 2 ordinances that are critically important and absolutely the right thing to do. One is the Good Natured program, where they are actively targeting good green space in developed areas under development pressure. They have it in their bond program, and they're doing really good things that way. The green space we've found as we're looking at the modeling in that TSI project is critical. It gives you basically, I'm an engineer, so a factor of safety for when we get, not if, but when we get the crazy rainfalls, there's a place for the water to go that isn't someone's home or business. And then lastly, the 2 ordinances that y'all are working on that are really a good idea. One is a riparian ordinance that protects riparian buffers. The other one protects floodplain storage. And both of those are critical to maintain in developing areas, because those, again, will give you a factor of safety.
So let me jump in for a moment if I could. Brandy's question is excellent, her comment, and also everything Sue has said, I totally agree with. But here's what I want you to know.
Use your microphone.
I have a microphone on.
Sorry.
A few years ago in south of Dallas, down in Ellis County, there's a rancher there who got 19 inches of rain in one day. 19 inches of rain in one day. Now, he had a lot of native plants and wetlands and so on that he constructed. That really helped ameliorate the flow of water, but pretty much hit his ranch. Still washing things out, headed for the Trinity, went to Houston. Now, Army Corps did some modeling to show what would happen if you took that 19 inches of rain and moved it north of Dallas or northwest. People would die. That much water came barreling down Trinity all at once. Mm-hmm. So this is a very real issue. And these water issues are literally issues of life and death. We had a 12-inch rain in Dallas a few years ago that caused enormous damage. Think of adding 7 more inches of rain to that. So as we talk about these issues, this to me is the critical issue of all, because water is essential to everything that we do. We all have to have it to drink, but it has enormous power. So this is an issue I want us to really dive into here in a few minutes at our tables, but I want to emphasize the fact that on a daily basis, we are losing our watershed and our ability to take this rainwater and deal with it naturally. So what we do with this particular issue is critical across all other disciplines. And it's important that we think about the things that Brandy has said, that Sue has told us, because in our planning for the future, this is the most critical piece of all in my mind. Because what happens with water affects biodiversity, it affects the built environment, affects everything we talked about this morning. So in a few minutes when we go to table work, ask for your best thinking and your best attention, because this issue affects everything else. Now, I'll mention this also. The Army Corps, in discussions that I've had with them, have pointed out that, there's a 50-year rain supposed to happen once every 50 years, 100-year rain once every 100 years. In the last 10 years in North Texas, we have had 20 rain events that were 50 or 100-year rain events. 20 in 10 years. What we know about the future is it's extreme and it's unpredictable. So therefore, nature-based solutions are critical to us because it's almost impossible to think that we're going to be able to deal with this through man-made mechanical means. Our watershed can protect us if we don't pave over it or don't destroy it. But these are issues that are hard issues to deal with because it's rubbing up against what people want to develop. But these are very real issues, and life is literally at stake. And, the tragedies in the hill country last summer. The hill country has been paved over methodically for about 30 years now. And much of what happened there was not just due to lack of sirens. It was due to the fact there was concrete upriver. That's just the truth. So, Sue, I appreciate you bringing this knowledge to us. I do want to make sure we get some questions and some table work in. But any other questions for Sue now? Then we're going to go to table work.
I think Christy has a question.
Do you want me to have her on the microphone or
Use your outside voice.
Christy.
Is Cedar Hill in Cobb's area?
Yes.
It seems to me that they've done the best job as committing their city building to nature. Do you have any facts that support that the water issues are better in Cedar Hill because of that commitment?
I do not. I know they're doing a great job, and I know that they have really leaned in to the natural resources that are in and around that city, but I don't have any quantification of benefit. I can't help but think that there are some.
Sure.
I just don't, at the top of mind, have that.
But it's well known at COG that they do their commitment. Okay, my next question. You were talking about codes a minute ago. I don't understand why Dallas or Fort Worth have any codes against building so many feet from a riparian environment. Especially, I'm a big proponent of urban creeks, and it blows my mind that DISD just built a giant gym 10 feet away from a small urban creek.
To be honest, the state permit for any type of construction over an acre in size precludes construction and clearing of a riparian within 50 feet of the channel banks. That said, that doesn't typically get involved in the contract itself or in the design. It is something that is put on the contractor after the fact. And so the contractor then defaults to, well, I'm just building what's in the plans. And so there are, within the state permits for construction in and near channels, there are requirements. And so that becomes a local enforcement challenge. There's one thing that came up earlier in the week, and it was in some discussions with my bioeconomy folks that are looking at urban agriculture. And that was, someone noted that we look at water as an extractive system rather than a circular system. And I think there's some truth to that. We look to where we can get water, and then we make it go away. And we don't look at hanging on to it and recycling it and reusing it multiple times. And so I think that's something that I would drop here as well, because I think it's germane. And I think it is something that we need to be looking at more closely moving forward.
Let's go to table work.
Thank you very much, Sue. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Sue brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise, and she will be around. So we're going to move into our table discussions. For those of you that are just joining us, Welcome. We are so glad that you're here. I'm Catherine Guerra, and we are going to talk about what we just heard. We're going to synthesize some of this information and come up with some ideas and then report out from our tables. So if you're just sitting over here at a table by yourself and you want to come on over here and join the rest of us, meet some folks and connect and share your ideas, and we will come back to you in about 10 minutes or so with a report out.